tea today. It's too late for coffee. I'm old. We're covering Metasploit framework today, and we're going to start with msfvenom and then create another video for the msf console. msfvenom is a payload generation program which has a huge database of exploit scripts. You can list out all of the scripts with list payloads, which would output a giant list of everything in the payloads directory. We could then filter it further down with platform. We could choose something like Windows, Linux, Android, OS X. Let's hit Windows for now. This would still output a very large list, so let's just take the output and pipe it into grep to perform a search. Grep is Global Regular Expression Protocol. Reverse TCP and hit enter to look up a reverse shell for transfer control protocol, I believe. msfvenom, you can also customize the payloads. You can encode them, converting them into different forms. You can obfuscate them. Obfuscate obscures the payload so it doesn't look like a malicious script. You can encrypt the payload. And within Metasploit, you've got the meterpreter shell, which is an advanced reverse shell that comes in, as they say here, two flavors: a staged payload and a stageless payload. Staged payload is a smaller file. It's not an all-in-one file. It is something that requires communication back to the command and control center, which to me means there's going to be increased network traffic during your attack. It requires back and forth communication, so you're going to, number one, leave more forensic evidence as a hacker, and number two, the back and forth communication means that there are more chances for the connection to fail, making it less reliable potentially. Stageless payloads are a much larger file. I kind of see them as all-in-ones, and you'll see the file size difference. It needs to just fire out once. There's no back and forth communication, so that makes it more reliable, and to me means there's going to be less forensic evidence potentially to track. So let's go ahead and get back to the output here. All of the stuff in red was the matched phrase from grep, and it's all within Windows. And we've got all sorts of fun tools here for exploits. We're going to grab a Python meterpreter staged reverse TCP next. So msfvenom will use the P argument for payload, and we'll jump into the Python directory. Then within the Python directory, meterpreter, and you see how, I'm going to clear this. I've learned this lesson so that you can see it and my picture doesn't get in the way. msfvenom P Python meterpreter. So right here, the underscore, I'm going to replace it with a /, which means it's going to dig into the meterpreter directory and grab just the reverse TCP script itself, the staged version. If I left the underscore, it would, I think, include meterpreter, which is the stageless version, which is the bigger file format, all in one, I guess including the reverse shell meterpreter. We're going to specify our own IP for now with the loopback IP address. If you perform an IP address command, IP space ADDR, you'll see your loopback IP and your public IP there. That's where you can find that. And we're specifying port 4444. And let's go ahead and hit enter. This will just output the script to console. And it's going to output it to console in the raw formatting by default, which looks to be base 64. So once that loads in, we'll see the base 64 and what it looks like. Before we do that, check out the file size here, 493 bytes. Keep that in mind. Right here, it's throwing up some warnings, not errors. No platform selected. We didn't give it a platform argument. No arch selected, no architecture. We didn't give it the arch argument specifying like x86 for arc or Windows for the platform, anything like that. No encoder specified, outputting raw payload instead of being encoded in like Python, which we'll do next. File size, Python dunders, encoder UTF-8. Right here's your base 64. This is the script itself. You can tell it's base 64 because it's a bunch of, hash looking encoding, but it ends in this double equals sign. That's the, I guess, top indication for me that it's base 64. And when I see anything like this, immediately I'm like, I could go to CyberChef and hit from base 64. It's got auto bake set. We'll paste this in and it'll decode it for us right away and show us the little Python script that's 493 bytes. Imports some libraries, runs through a for loop, range 10, which means it goes from 0 to 9, 10 iterations where it tries to connect to a socket. If it fails, it jumps to from the try section to the accept section, sleeps for 5 seconds before the loop runs again, tries it again. If it is a successful socket connection, it breaks, skips the accept line, defines an L variable. And this is where I get lost a little bit because I don't know exactly what these different libraries do. But it then compares the D variable to the L variable in a while loop, while length D is less than L. Go ahead and start plus equaling, adding to, can't remember the proper term for that, adding to the list, D plus D equals 1, D plus equals 1. And we're going to skip that before I just start thinking and zoning out. And then it performs this last item here. So that's the script. Looks like it can take up to 50 seconds if it errors out a few times, and only the 9th out of 10, well, the 10th out of 10 iterations work, but it goes 0 to 9. So I digress. Let's get back to it. So we can also, I pressed up on the keypad there. We can specify F for Python, which is format. Press enter again. We'll let that run and it'll, instead of outputting it in base 64, it should output it as Python formatting. Should still be the same size. And then after that, we'll check out instead of staged, we'll check out Stageless. So yeah, here's the Python giant list of stuff. Did I do something different? No. Sorry, zoned out there for a moment. I was thinking about it and what it's actually outputting it as. So it's not clearly outputting the script itself. I'm not going to think about it. For now, let's go ahead and try a stageless payload. If I thought about it, I'd be thinking about it silently for a while. Not entertaining for you guys, maybe entertaining for me. So we're going to use a Python payload interpreter, but this time we'll use the underscore for stageless in this scenario. Still doing the reverse TCP exploit. Host is still going to be the same. our loopback IP 0.0.0.0.1, port 4444. For funsies, let's just format it Python, and then what we're going to do is then take this output and append it to a new file that we'll call meterpreter reverse TCP stageless.py. So what that's going to do is output all this junk above into a .py file within the documents folder or directory where we are now. Hit enter on that, let it run. While that's running, I'll show you how you can see the loopback IP address for yourself. LO loopback right there, or you could not just IP address, but you could also run ifconfig, which gives you a bit more information. But generally, I'm grabbing the IP addresses for now. So let's take a look here. All right, it's not going to output everything to console since we're sending the output to the file, giving us the same info, but the payload size was 493 bytes with the stageless version, 116K here, and then the full file size is 566,000 bytes, which I believe includes the meterpreter shell, reverse shell rather, correct me if I'm wrong. But now we've got in our documents here, MRT stageless. We'd be executing that, MRT stageless by running the Python command, hitting enter, and there we go. So it didn't take 50 seconds, it went pretty fast. So I'm guessing that the very first attempt on the for loop was a connection, and then it outputted its fun stuff. So we don't have it completely connected to run an exploit right now, but that is how you list the various payloads with the -- list payloads argument. We can filter it with arguments like platform and arch. And we took a look at a staged payload, and we took a look at a stageless payload. Staged being much smaller, requiring communication to command and control, being less reliable, and stageless being a much bigger file, and it's just an all-in-one stageless, more reliable way to go, but a lot bigger. So that's where we'll end it. Hope you learned something. If I said something wrong, correct me in the comments, leave any additional feedback or thoughts. Otherwise, just learn real good, Bye.